So I'll go ahead and move on, and we are now going to discuss the file key details. I will provide an overview of the background and essential information for each file type submitted during Fall 1. So we'll go ahead and start with the SSID enrollment file, also known as the SENR file. So while today's session offers a condensed overview, we encourage you to explore the CSIS YouTube training channel for more in-depth guidance. Each file type is covered in a dedicated video, as Nate showed you guys, typically about 1 hour long, offering a detailed explanation and examples. So let's begin by reviewing some key points about the SSID enrollment or SENR file type. The SENR file is essential for establishing ownership of student records. This ownership is what allows your LEA to submit additional records for a student in CALPADS. The ownership period is defined by the enrollment start date and the enrollment exit date in the SENR record of your LEA. Without this ownership, no other student data submissions can be made. The SENR is also used to determine cohort inclusion for secondary students for the adjusted cohort graduation rate and cumulative enrollment. The SENR file includes important data elements such as district of geographic residence, transfer reasons, and enrollment status such as primary, secondary, and short term. So let's go ahead and I'm going to talk about exit reasons and their impact. So exit reason codes in the SENR file are especially important as they help determine graduation status, dropouts, and completers, and are used to denote returning and transferring and matriculating students. So some examples of exit reason codes include E155, year-end enrollment, expected to return the next academic year; T160, transfer to another California public school; E230, completer exit. And a full list of exit reason codes are available in the CALPADS code set documentation. Now let's move on to the SINF file. So the student information records are required for all students in CALPADS. In fact, when you submit an SCNR record for the first time for a student, a shell SINF record is created in CALPADS, which you have to be sure to update. The SINF file contains demographic and address information about each student, and it is used for purposes listed on this slide. So SINF data is used to indicate race, ethnicity, legal and preferred names, gender and gender changes, address history, direct certification matching at the state level. It is also used to identify students who are Title III eligible immigrants and includes students in socioeconomically disadvantaged subgroups. So moving on to the student program file, the SPRG file. In Fall 1, the SPRG file identifies students who are eligible for or participating in a specific state or federal programs, report EL instruction strategies, and help determine inclusion in the socioeconomically disadvantaged subgroups. Accurate SPRG record reporting ensures students are properly counted for funding services and accountability. Again, SPRG records track student eligibility and participation in various state and federal programs. These records should be submitted and updated continuously throughout the year to ensure students receive appropriate services. So programs that are collected in Fall 1 are listed in the orange table on this slide. So some examples include free and reduced price meals, program 181 and 182, gifted and talented, the GATE program code 127, homeless, program code 191, tribal foster youth, program code 193, and language instruction programs, LIP programs, codes 300 to 306. Title I Part C migrant program code 135 has been retired at the end of the 24-25 academic year. You can see Flash 138 for more details. So other programs that students may be participating in will not show up until you see them in end-of-year reports, even if you submit the data now. This includes Title I Part A programs, armed forces, pregnant and parenting, and so on. So you may notice that the Homeless Program Code 191 will appear in both Fall 1 and end of year reports. So moving on to Student English Language Acquisition, or the SELA file. The SELA record is expected for all students in all enrollment types: primary enrollment code 10, short-term enrollment code 30, and in grades TK to 12. The Student English Language Acquisition file is used to report the English language status for every student and not just for English learners. This information is essential for determining assessment and eligibility, such as the funding allocations like LCFF and support services for English learners. Every student is assigned one of the following statuses. So English only, EO, initially fluent English proficient, IFEP, English learner, EL, reclassified fluent English proficient, RFEP, and then to be determined, TBD. This is used when a student's status is not yet confirmed, and adult English learner, the ADEL code. So when you're preparing to submit or update the SELA record in CALPADS, it is important to gather the necessary information from your English Learner Services Department ahead of time. So this includes the English language acquisition status, the primary language, the ELAS status date, a correction reason code if applicable. So correction reason codes are especially important when making changes to a student's ELAS record. And the reason, so ELAS changes follow a specific sequence. For example, EL to RFEP. If you need to change a status out of sequence, you must include a correction reason code. So these codes can only be submitted via online maintenance. And always consult the When to Report a SELA Correction Reason Code section in the CALPADS user manual to ensure you're using the correct code for your scenario. So in this slide, this chart shows a logical sequence of ELAS codes. The first step for an LEA to take regarding ELAS is to distribute and collect the home language survey for students. The home language survey should be administered to a student only one time, upon the student's initial enrollment in a California public school. If the home language survey indicates English or American Sign Language is the sole language spoken at home, the student will be given an ELAS of English only. If the home language survey indicates a primary language other than English or ALS, the student will get an ELAS of TBD until they are given the initial LPAC assessment. Students may only remain in TBD status for 30 days. If a student is TBD and takes the initial LPAC assessment, the results will place them in one of the two statuses. If the initial LPAC indicates the student is English proficient, the students will be placed in IFEP status. If the initial LPAC indicates a lack of clearly defined English language skills, the students will be placed in EL status. If a TK to 12th grade student with an ELAS of EL becomes 22 years old, they will be placed in ADEL status. If a student with an ELAS of EL is tested with the summative LPAC and the results indicate English proficiency, the students will be placed in RFEP status. The arrows on this slide show the logical progression of the different ELAS status. If a change is being made to a student's ELAS that is not represented by an arrow on this slide, it is not a logical sequence and a correction code must be used. So the requirement to test students with initial LPAC within 30 days of enrollment does not apply to TK students. LEAs should continue to submit the SELA file and populate the ELAS status of TBD if the home language survey indicates a primary language other than English or ASL. The TBD status will remain with the student until they are tested with the initial LPAC when enrolled in kindergarten. So CALPADS is no longer sending TK enrollment records to TOMS, therefore they will not show up in TOMS as eligible for LPAC testing. Students with disabilities. So there are 4 file types in Fall 1. So student disability status, or the SWDS file, the MEET file, the plan file, and the services file. So I'll start with students with disability status. This file captures a chronological history of a student's eligibility for and participation in special education, and if not eligible and not participating. The file also captures the reason why using a non-participation reason. The students with disability status allows us to determine if a student is eligible and participating on a specific report date, and therefore included on reports. This identification is important because Fall 1 only includes data from students with active plans. So we look at the most recent SWDS record on Census Day, and this day it's going to be on October 1st. The students must have a status of eligible and participating regardless of the LEA. The record must meet these date conditions to appear on Fall 1 reports. So status effective start date is on or before the report date. The status effective end date is on or after the report date or still active. So the next file is the special education meeting file. This file captures key information about individualized education program, so IEP meetings. These records document initial evaluations, plan reviews, eligibility reevaluation, amendments, and delays. For CALPADS reporting, LEA should submit the meet record with the date the meeting was initiated, even if the meeting is incomplete at the time and additional meetings are scheduled to finalize an IEP. So the meet records are used to track initial evaluations for both Part C and Part B, plan reviews, eligibility re-evaluation, initial evaluations that are pending and are not overdue, initial evaluations, plan reviews, and eligibility re-evaluations that are pending and are now overdue, along with the associated meeting delay code. So meet records are used for monitoring reports 16.7 and 16.8. So under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, it requires IEP teams to monitor and document student progress. Monitoring a student's progress allows IEP teams to determine whether the services and support provided are an educational benefit for the student. So next up is the special education plan file. The file captures essential details about a student's IEP, Individualized Education Program, ISP, Individualized Service Plan, or IF, Individualized Family Service Plan. It includes information such as program setting, general education participation, parental involvement, transition goals, and the date that a specific version of a student's plan became effective. So key data elements include primary disability, so the reason of SPED eligibility, plan type, IEP, IFSP, or ISP, program setting, so environment in which SPED services are provided, general education participation. It's categorized percentage of the time a student is in a traditional non-special education learning environment, and transition planning. So moving on to the next file is the special education services file. It captures the specific services outlined in the student's active special education plan. These services are a critical part of documenting how we meet the needs of students with disabilities. While the services data is not included in Fall 1 reports, the California Department of Education is obligated to monitor and enforce LEA responsibilities under the Federal Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So each services record provides details about the file type of service being provided, the service provider, the location where the service is delivered, and the frequency and duration of the service. So service records help identify students who are not receiving the services outlined in their IEP and help identify systemic issues within LEAs related to the service delivery. So again, the 4 special education file types are not submitted directly to CALPADS. Rather, the SPED data is entered into the local special education data system, or SED system, and transferred directly into CALPADS from the SEDS via an API. The API is what allows this automated interaction between the local SEDS and CALPADS. This allows for faster processing of students with disabilities records. The local SED system will provide a report after each instance of the nightly process with information on rejected records. So the guidance from both CSIS and the CDE is to make changes to SPED data in the SED system rather than in CALPADS to mitigate against discrepancies between the two systems and triggering of potential errors. This is because there is a legal component to special education reporting, and discrepancies between the two systems can result in litigation. So this concludes our discussion of the key details and file types for Fall 1.